Before we get started, I'm just going to ask that if any of you want to have CPD accreditation for the talk, that you just refer to the chat bar where I will post my email address. Please simply send me your HPCSA registration number in an email, and I will arrange for the CPD points to be accredited. And so I'm going to just add that to the chat in a moment. And on that note, I'm going to then hand over to our head of division, Clint Hendrickson, who will then introduce our speaker for the day. So over to you, and I'll start recording the talk as well. Thanks. Over to you, Clint.
Thanks, Jeroen. Good afternoon from my side to everyone, and a hearty welcome to this FACE seminar hosted by Emergency Medicine. I've got great pleasure to introduce our speaker and the topic. And today, let's start with the person, perhaps the sector, and then I'll chat a little bit about the topic as well. So for those who do not know Almero Oosthuizen, colleague and friend, is an emergency physician with 2 decades of clinical experience in various roles. And he currently works as the clinical lead for improvement, innovation and related strategy for the Provincial Directorate for Clinical Services Improvement, CSI. So CSI is a small provincial team that considers all elements that contribute towards delivering value to people and communities and works towards improving those for everyone. Almero works for the Emergency and Clinical Services Support Sector, so ECSS. And this sector oversees EMS, disaster medicine, forensics, innovation and improvement, contracts like your NHLS, labs, the HIV programs, etc., CDC. It's a very busy and very important sector, and it is involved with a lot of cross-cutting functions that we all involved with, and it has a significant impact and influence on our day-to-day service and our day-to-day functioning. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Almero. He's going to be talking to us about, so I'm going to let him introduce his topic. We have a slight topic deviation tailored to the audience, and I'm quite excited to be here. So Almero, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Clint. That was real kind. And it's such a joy to have an opportunity to talk to all of you today. I am pathologically curious about everything, and tragically, even after all this time, still believe that what we're doing is worthwhile and maybe even possible. So any chance that I get to talk to good people about good things is something that I really enjoy. So I'm going to share my screen. And what we're going to be talking about today is just a little bit of a deviation from what it was advertised as. So what I want to talk to you about today is how do you make a difference in really immensely challenging and difficult circumstances? I think I am, and I assume that everyone on this call, we're all interested in progress. None of us gets up in the morning and thinks, oh, I hope that today, with my effort and under my watch, things are going to get just a little bit worse for everybody. None of us does that. So we're all interested in progress. And depending on the day, sometimes we still have faith that it can happen, and sometimes perhaps we don't. But I've spent many years, just because, like I said, I'm pathologically interested in everything, obsessing around this idea of how do we make progress in challenging places. And I'd like to share just 4 or 5 concepts with you guys that we have found incredibly useful. I think that there are pieces of the puzzle all over the place, but I can't confidently tell myself that most of the approaches that I'm involved in and that we're involved in the moment, that I can consistently predict that if we do it this way, we will get progress. And so I think that there's some room for us to advance our thinking. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. And so it's going to be somewhat ideological, but profoundly practical. And hopefully I can pull those two things together. And so the first thing that I think we have to acknowledge is there you go, is that progress is more than just one thing. And so in the basket of progress, so in the basket of building a better world, of providing better services to our communities, of being fairer and kinder to our staff and the servants that serve our communities, there are many endeavors packed in that desire. You know, there's just day-to-day business, there's quality assurance, there's quality improvement, there's service design, there's service expansion, there's service addition, there's improvement sciences, there's innovation. All of these things together constitute a progress strategy. And so I think that if one of the things that has really been a big breakthrough for us is to step back from the heat and the intensity of whatever challenge it is that we're dealing with, and to give ourselves the luxury of just scoping out a little bit and trying to understand what's actually going on here. And that process has led us to a series of thinking, which is what we're talking about. So progress is a communal endeavor in what we're doing. Everybody in this call has made a decision and a commitment to work with other people towards a better deal for our communities and a better deal for our staff. It's not a one-man game. And so in that way, progress happens together, which means that if you're interested in progress over time, you have to have an approach to or a strategy for or a toolkit for progress, but you also have to have it for the together part of it. Many of the, well, often, and maybe it's just my personality, but often, especially sort of earlier on in my career, my perception was, well, the progress is so obvious. It's just these other people are, or we can't make it work, or this team doesn't work, but the reality is that we are all here. We decided to be involved in a communal endeavor towards progress. And therefore, you have to have an approach to progress, but also you have to have an approach to together. And I propose that there are 4 things that we need to consider quite strongly. You'll see that the slides that I'm going to talk on are more sort of concept slides like this. What I have done is in between the slides, just put it's very crude, just a little content slide there for people to have a look at afterwards as a reminder, but we won't be dwelling here. So the first thing is that when you're trying to make the world a better place with other people, so when you're trying to do progress together, you need very powerful common ground. I can't overstress how important this is. This is that ultimate baseline, that foundational thing that we all agree upon. You could call it a galvanizing vision that you want, it doesn't matter. Down the line, as we move towards a better world, we might diverge on our opinions in terms of, of implementation or strategy or priority or whatever else. But ultimately, regardless of our differences, there has to be one fire. There has to be a powerful common ground where we can return to that can help us reorientate towards the direction that we want to go. So this powerful common ground brings us together and helps to focus us and anchors us and shows us the way that we need to go. It has an interesting side effect, which is that people that don't agree to this immediately unmask themselves as not really on our journey, which can be very liberating. Now, for us, the common ground that we're interested in is health justice. And so we would define health justice as a state where everybody has access to quality. When some people have access to quality and others don't, that's not justice. And when everybody has access to poor quality, that's not justice either. And regardless of the services and products that you render, if the price a person has to pay to access that is unreasonable relative to time away from family, time away from work, interference with educational or economic opportunities, and so on and so forth, that's not justice either. So health justice is the state, it's the destination that I think all of us are interested in. Someone that has a fundamental problem with the idea that we like to build a society where everybody has access to quality, I don't think that we'll be finding each other, and maybe it's better for us to part ways. Now, the question then often arises, well, what about equity? Does this exclude equity? No, this is profoundly linked to equity. So while health justice is the destination, that's how we would like society to look like, equity is the approach that we have to follow to get there. So if I'm really close to health justice and Clint is really far from health justice, he needs more help and I need less help, and that's equity. So equity is the approach that we need to take towards the destination of health justice. And I do want to just mention that so health justice without, as a destination, without equity as an approach, is unlikely to ever be achieved. But similarly, equity as an approach without a clearly articulable destination in our proposition is health justice. So equity without a destination is vulnerable to being swayed by whatever ideological or political whims hold power at any given point in time. And so justice without equity is unlikely to ever to be achieved, and equity without a destination, a powerful destination, is unlikely to take us where we really want to be. So the first step is we need powerful common ground. We need to know what we're busy with. And so again, like I said, there will be some crude slides in between, just as a little summary. I'll keep it up for a few seconds just in case those watching the videos after the fact would like to pause briefly and read. So once you've agreed upon common ground, whether you're an individual or a team, you have to know what is my place relative to all of that? What's my mandate? So in this desire for us to work towards a state of a just society, in our case, a just society relative to health justice, what is my role to play in it? What is the Department of Health's role to play in it? What is FACE's role to play in it? And then we propose that our constitutional and moral mandate is to serve the health and wellness needs of people and communities. It's as simple as that. I think that it's important to expand it ever so slightly and to say that the reason that we want to do that is so that we can enable people to live the lives of dignity and meaning that they value and desire. So our mandate relative to our journey towards health justice is definitely health and wellness focused. That's our primary mandate. We're not logistics, we're not infrastructure. But we must acknowledge the role of our efforts towards whole societal progress, towards lives of dignity and meaning. And so it means that where other partners need to be involved or where we need to work in a cross-cutting way, that makes sense relative to our mandate. But if you have a powerful common ground and you have no idea where you sit relative to that and how you're supposed to participate and contribute towards that, it's unlikely that you'll be able to be effective. You might play outside of your mandate with very little effect, or languish inside your mandate and not really leverage the mandate that was given to you. So if we can agree upon the fact that our powerful common ground is an equitable approach towards health justice, which is a state where everybody has access to quality, and that our part to play in that is to serve the health and wellness needs of communities so that they can access the lives of value and meaning that they need, that's all just talk. Up until this point, no one has been helped whatsoever. We need a value proposition. So again, I'll just pause very briefly here for those that would like to pause and see, but I will carry on. And so the third element of our 4-element progression is this idea. You need a very crisp value proposition. Because, a common ground and a mandate, it's incredibly powerful, but it remains abstract, relatively abstract. But if you look at that gentleman there that's about to catch that lady, that guy has a very clear and crisp value proposition. He's there to catch her and make sure that she doesn't fall and get hurt, nothing else. And so we have to be able to translate our desire to progress to some kind of value proposition. Okay, well, we're here to serve the health and wellness needs of people, but how? And our value proposition is service delivery. Very important. Up until the moment that something is done, nothing will get done. Policy papers, strategy retreats, visions and missions, mandate explorations, none of these things make a difference in the lives of the people and communities that we all care so deeply about. So our value proposition is service delivery. For something to be done, it must be done. We have to do something. But just saying that isn't far enough yet, because even service delivery, well, what services, how, to whom, how must it be delivered? And so we have to progress beyond this idea of just a value proposition of service delivery. And again, I'll keep this up for a brief moment. So, well, we need to really know what our product is. And so that gent can be standing up there, ready to catch that woman hurtling towards him. But there's a whole bunch of other things that's going on there to make it possible and safe. And so, unfortunately, strategy and related things happens in a loose, rich, complex world or space, and it should. But the execution of service delivery is extremely concrete. And if there's anyone in this talk that has ever straddled those two worlds, you'll know. If you're responsible for service delivery at the granular level, you're not dealing with ideals. You're dealing with rands and cents and staff complements and indicator compliance and opening hours and infrastructure maintenance requests and all of those granular details. And so if we're not able to understand the nitty-gritty of what our actual product is and how we deliver that into the world, it's extremely difficult to translate from the ideological or the values layer through to the delivery layer. So what is our product? And so we would say that service delivery happens in a series of service events. It's as simple as that. People get helped when they get helped, yes? And so our product is the health and wellness service event. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the practicalities of the health and wellness service event in just a moment. So I'll just leave that up for a quick second and take a sip of water, if you'll forgive me. So I'm going to get back to the product in just a second. But then the progression is full progress as a communal endeavor, meaning if we want to make things better together, we need to have an approach to progress and an approach to together. We quite like this four-step progress, where firstly you have common ground, health justice, an equitable approach to health justice. And then when you understand your mandate relative to that, which is to serve the health and wellness needs of people and communities so that they can have the lives of meaning and dignity that they desire towards whole society progress. That our value proposition, the way that this becomes real in the world, is service delivery. Someone must be helped for them to be helped. But that a vague idea of service delivery isn't enough. You have to understand your product. What is the thing that you're delivering to society that actually makes a difference? And for us, that's a health and wellness service event. So I want to just talk very briefly about the health and wellness service event, but I also want to just show that this approach is both profoundly ideological and profoundly practical. Even if you take something like health justice, if you now need to make difficult decisions about services or programs to chase or not, we can ask ourselves, this thing that we want to do now, is it moving us closer to health justice or not? So is it improving access, yes or no? Is it improving scope and scale towards everybody, yes or no? And is it improving quality, yes or no? And if it is, then it's potentially in our line. And if it isn't, it's not. And so each of these ideological elements can be used as very practical and powerful decision-making tools and even design tools down the line. Let's just briefly look at the health and wellness service event. So this is our own frame. Again, this is not, but what we say that the health and wellness service event is the moment where someone's needs are met, yes, or the opportunities are mined. And that there are three elements present in that moment. There are the people or communities that we serve, there's the servants and services that help them, and then there's the enabling environment that makes this possible. So by this definition, a community health worker delivering a health promotions talk at a school is a health and wellness service event, and a child having a heart transplant done at Red Cross is a health and wellness service event. So it scales infinitely in and out. In terms of the green box, so servants and services, in our particular context, this is mostly a human being, some kind of clinician, a nurse, a doctor, a physio, a pharmacist. But it can also be a non-human entity. So for instance, an e-locker for the pickup of medication, that's a service event. an AI chatbot giving advice on diabetic diet or lifestyle. That is a service event. So servants and services. So we have a few rules for ourselves when we approach product, but maybe just before I get to that, to say that the way then that we apply this product idea is to say that there are three things that we need to do relative to product if we are going to achieve health justice. The first one is we have to select for success, meaning we have to select, design, and build the type of service events that move us closer to justice and whole societal progress. For instance, we really should think very carefully about designing the type of services that require people to take time out of work or education. If we're saying that as a country, as a society, some of our critical priorities are to get people in and keep them in education, and to get people in and keep them in the job market. So if we're designing and delivering service events like having to pick up your medication at a clinic without an appointment, meaning that you lose a day of work and or income, or you lose a day of work and or education, well, that isn't responsive to what we want. Whereas if we partner, for instance, with occupational health services and say, how can we work with you or with campus health to provide a wider set of PHC type services and piggyback on your existing infrastructure so that people don't have to stay out of class, or don't have to stay at work, well, that's much more aligned. So that's what we mean by selection. We have to select and design the kind of product that aligns with the way that we try to serve the people and communities that we care about. So that's selection. The second one is quantity. We have to put more product into the world. And I know that we want to be in a place where we've made ourselves redundant, yes? Where we don't have to provide that much services because our health promotion and wellness activities and so on and so forth have been successful. But the reality is that we are grossly underservicing our communities, and not just us, the world. Our planet is unable to serve the volume of health need that's out there. So we might get to a place where we have a lower volume of service events that needed in society, but we're certainly not there. So there's no version of a journey towards health justice that doesn't include at least an initial increase in just the quantity of well-selected health and wellness service events. And lastly, it's about quality. The event must deliver the result for which it is designed at the cost that it is intended to do so. And we cannot tolerate drops in quality, because at the other end of drops in quality is not metrics, it's people and communities that move further and further away from health justice and struggle harder and harder to live meaningful lives that they value. So all three of these elements are equally important. Servants and services, for instance, so our staff are as important as our patients and communities. If we value the humanness of our staff less than the humanness of our communities, then we will consume our own people in our attempt to serve our communities. And one morning we'll get up and we'll realize that policies and circulars don't help people. The hands of servants do that, and they're all gone because we consumed them. So good service design in this model acknowledges the fact that if you don't take care of all three elements equally, you will not be able to design or sustain quality. Now, I'm running a little bit later than I wanted to. There are practical examples and stuff, but I think I'm going to pause there just by saying, hustle like it matters because it does. It doesn't always look like it. I said earlier that I'm still tragically optimistic about our ability to make difference in the world, and I really am. And when you find the right way and you relentlessly lean into it, the difference that we want to make, it happens. I'm always very happy to be contacted on any format, and I am going to just hand over to Clint now and say thank you very much. Let's see if there are any questions or comments. Please do disagree with me. We always say, I would much rather good people break my ideas so that we can rebuild them better than to leave that up to bad people.
Thank you so much, Almero. I've got a lot to process, and all very interesting, and as you said, practical and idealistic all together. Can we try and pull it together with an example, perhaps, while people are bringing comments?
I'll give you an example that I still get goosebumps when I just think about it. So it's what happened up in Ceres and Witzenberg with Madeleine Bauer and Henry Liebenberg, some of the most inspirational public servants that I've ever met. So Ceres Witzenberg district has big agri, yes, right? And we all know the challenges of delivering services to agricultural communities. I think everyone in this call understands that. And Henry and them sat one day and they said, well, you know what? On many of these large farms, there are more people and families living there than in the surrounding towns. And so in actual fact, let's just make a mind shift and say, well, these farms are communities. And what's our mandate? To serve the health and wellness needs of communities. And when you went to go look in terms of access to quality for everybody, those guys on those farms, the access cost for them to serve it, like to go from the Tui farm to Oppieberg round trip to pick up measures, 500 rands by private taxi. So I mean, it's completely unacceptable. But these guys, these farms, they have occupational health services, and so through quite a long process, they are at a point now where I think around 20,000 people are getting comprehensive PHC services on farms and in pack stores in that district. I could talk the whole day about all the benefits, but for instance, for the Tui farms, which is just the one example, they've got 5 brick and mortar clinics, 2 of which are open all days a week, the other one's 3 days a week. They employ 5 CMPs, 20 community health workers, all of that on their own dime. They provide all the services. We provide medication, consumables, governance, and linkage to care. It's an incredibly cost-effective model that now means that tens of thousands of people have moved closer to health justice because we leverage our mandate and we leverage partnerships. In their pack store model, it starts off with a few people that are stable in care, and very quickly a whole bunch of other people see, hey, this is way more convenient for me. And then all of a sudden their compliance gets better, and then they get into the program, and then their care gets better. Not just that, if you look in that area in farms that are included in the program versus farms that are not, the hypertension target attainment rate, I'm not talking about medication compliance. So we know in most of our communities, hypertensive patient target attainment rate probably around 50%, which sort of bears out for those. On the program forms, 90% plus. Target attainment rate for blood pressure for rural agricultural metabolic syndrome patients, absolutely staggering. So I think that this is a very good example of where good people sit around, they have a clear idea of what justice is, access to quality for everybody. Let's define these people of communities. We have to serve their health and wellness needs to the benefits of everybody. What needs to happen? Service delivery needs to happen. Well, we're going to have to develop product, man. Let's sit with our partners and let's see how we can construct the type of service events that meets their needs and progresses us towards a better future for all.
Thanks, Almero. We had a brief discussion with Louis Jenkins just before we started about and potentially another example, Almero, sorry for putting you on the spot, but around the menial tasks that doctors and clinicians and nurses are doing, things, admin tasks and things that that removes us from our primary goal of service provision. And I know you're busy with something related to that. Would you mind just giving us a bit of
yeah, sure. So I have to rein myself in because it's such exciting work, but it's clinician-facing administrative support. So we're in the middle of a large set of phase 2 experiments now, where we basically say, on any given day, any person is doing one of 3 types of things. Value-adding primary work, so for a doctor, that's clinical care. Value-adding governance work, so for a clinical team, that would be the kind of governance that actually moves the needle. So audit, teaching, QI project, that kind of stuff. And then the third category is less value-adding work. So for the people in this call, that might be clinicians dealing with HR processes or doing indicator manual registry entries and ordering equipment repair log ones and stuff like that. It's extremely important. It doesn't mean that that work is not valuable. It's just less value adding relative to the intent of that asset, of that person. So is it important for the family waiting area at Groote Schuur Hospital to be clean and neat? It's extremely valuable. Is it appropriate for the CEO to be mopping it 3 times a day? No. So we make no value on the inherent value of the work. When we did our initial phase 1 experiment explorations, it was very clear that what we lacked was not just admin support, but clinician-facing administrative support. Clinician-facing admin support is when an administrative asset reports to the clinical team and builds value with the clinical team over time. In our phase 1 experiments, we showed that we're probably freeing up around about 20, we're adding about 20% of clinician time at about 20%, at about 20 times less cost. And we're busy with 17 phase 2 experiments. So we can say without any doubt that clinicians of all categories, nurse, pharma, doc, are spending concerning amounts of time on non-core administrative work, probably around 20% average, but up to as high as 40 or 50 in some contexts. We can say without any doubt that when we provide clinician-facing administrative support, this drops dramatically, sustainably, and the impact compounds over time. We know objectively that staff wellness and job satisfaction increases. We know that the volume and quality of clinical service delivery increases. And we know that governance, performance, and value and volume increases over time as well. In the phase 1 experiments, for about 5,000 rands a month, we freed up 100,000 rands of clinician time. That doesn't add value. And so our phase 2 mid-reports will be out soon. But I would like to be in a world where, not too far in the future, clinician-facing administrative support is acknowledged as a valuable tool for us as a department, and then built in structurally so that it can be accessible for everybody.
Almero, that's wonderful. I'm really looking forward to those results and then for the implementation thereof. Can I open the floor for questions? We've said a lot. I still have a few comments and questions there, but can I open the floor for any questions or comments with regards to the talk, with regards to the innovation and improvement? Here we go. Leonard, thank you.
Hi. Hello, Almero. Thank you, Clint.
Hi.
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you very well.
Almero, your talk was hugely inspiring for me. So thank you for speaking to me, and there are, the fundamentals of what you spoke about, like the common ground, the mandate, the value propositions. Those are things that, of course, can apply to a number of organizations, right? And in fact, there are organizations in health, justice, and healthcare that I work with, as well as with FACE, that could really benefit from your talk. So I'm going to share it with them. So I just really, I don't have a question. I just wanted to compliment you. And I think that while you were speaking, I thought to myself, you should really be in politics, but in a way you are, because healthcare is political. So it is. I mean, let's face it. So I just wanted to compliment you and thank you. Really, I was hugely inspired. Thanks.
It's very kind. And it's such a pleasure. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Leonard. Any other questions? While we're waiting for questions, you can either post questions in the chat or just put your hand up and then we'll line you while we're waiting for questions. Louis.
Yeah, thanks. Also, just from my side, Almero, thank you very much. You obviously have a fantastic way to bring across very valuable points. Yeah, maybe I thought while we're thinking what to ask that makes sense. And a question from my side would be, I mean, I fully agree with everything you said. And I think at a sort of higher level or managerial level or even senior level, we get this, hey? How to stay in the system, stay motivated, make a difference. But my question would be, what would you say to juniors, to MOs doing a shift in EC, or a clinician, Cosmo or MO, or intern working in OPD or primary healthcare clinic? Because, they don't I don't think that they use this language a lot. They want to get through the shift. They need to find time for lunch. They don't understand why patients don't get it. You know what I mean? So we need to find common language to encourage our junior teams. How would you sort of summarize that, if I can ask you a big question?
Yeah, no, it is a big question, and I'm going to try. So I was already accused of just joking at it being a politician. So I'll give you the politician's answer, and then I'll give you the Almero answer. I guess the politician's answer is I wouldn't. I would ask them how they're doing, and then I try to understand what it is that they need, and then I would use this frame to help me give it to them. I know that sounds glib, and I wish that there was a shortcut, but it is profoundly important. There's this interesting interplay between humility and courage, and they don't seem like good bedfellows. But I've had to learn that the tension between humility and courage is the engine that drives what all of us will do. You have to be humble to see the truth. You have to be humble to see what the world is and not what you want it to be. So the humility will show you the way, but then you have to be brave to go down that way. And that tension, that gravity spin between humility and courage will take us there. In a more concrete way, I think, your practical example is I would use these frames to build the performance enabling environment that my team deserves. So I would use this frame to justify the cost expenditure for clinician-facing admin support, so that my docs don't have to sit at home at night doing indicator stuff because they can't escape the clinical load at work. I would use this frame to justify the cost of processor support, so whether it's a phlebotomist or whatever else, so that they can spend time with patients or not. I would use this frame to advocate for their compliance burden and their accountability burden to be towards value generation, i.e., when they help patients, they should be praised. When they do not, that is a problem. But when they do not fill in a form on time and give it to HR, that shouldn't be a big deal. And I think that young people that want to, like, again, this comes back to that mythology. Young people that want to help patients, if they're pouring their blood out on the floor, and the only time that the management structure of their organization comes to them is when their cot form signature is in the wrong place, that is extremely damaging. And so a refocus on what is it that we're busy with. We are here to move our society towards health justice, and that means we are going to serve people. And it means those people matter, and you matter, and we better build a system that makes that link clean. And then lastly, I would do what you've done most of your career, and I think everyone in this call, which is to try as much as I can to stand in the gap, so that that dragon's flame, my back is strong enough for it, but I think a fragile young shoot just emerging from the ground should not be subjected to that.
Thanks, Almero. Thanks, Louis. That was wonderful. Steve first, and then we're going to go to Ben.
Thanks, Almero, for your input. Really valuable.
Thank you.
One of the reasons that or motivations for forming the FACE department, and by the way, our tagline is building inclusive communities of care together, was to try and work upstream from where we are in our ECs and primary care facilities and communities to address some of the drivers of health. And it comes to that whole of society approach, and the struggle that we have, the struggle for health, is ultimately a political one, because they're huge drivers: the alcohol industry, the drug cartels, the rubbish food that we eat that drives the chronic disease pattern that we see. that are flying in the opposite direction. So yes, we must do our job in the health sector as well as we can, but it's like whistling against the wind, because there are these huge forces in the opposite direction. So where in your conceptual philosophical framework does those whole of society, big picture political issues fit, and how do we help our junior colleagues to understand the bigger picture? Because otherwise it can be very demoralizing. I've got a research project following up our final year students into internship, and they're just like flattened by the system in other provinces largely. But it's like this tide of the burden of disease is like overwhelming, and the resources to deal with it are min. And these are big picture issues. So
yeah, I mean, I don't have a single crisp answer for you, but I do have some. I can tell you how I think about it, and I will bring it to the frame. But for me, it's important to understand that yes, I am a clinician and working in improvement and stuff, and so I am in the Department of Health, but I'm also a public servant. So while my direct mandate in this communal endeavor is the health and wellness space, I'm a public servant. So really all of this is in my space. So I think to evaluate my role relative to whole society progress, and so now that's why I said, so health justice might be access to quality for everybody, but I guess for me personally, societal justice is when I can live the life of meaning and value that I want. So public value, there's all sorts of frameworks of people that are smarter and more learned than me. But and so if we look at serving the health and wellness needs of people towards that, then if I'm trying to select, design, or scale a service that helps people, and another aspect of public service touches that, then it's my business. I might not have direct control over it, but it's my business.
So intersectional work.
Exactly. So I think you and many other people in this talk have spent a lot of time in their lives not shying away from this idea of, listen, okay, fair enough, we're doing diabetes training and things, but what the heck is going on with the food regulatory frameworks around, nutritional stuff? What the hell? And then who do we talk to about that? And then just chipping away. And I think what's good for me is that there is the individual or even team desire for that to happen, but ultimately the magic is when it becomes structural. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because it's the antithesis of what I thought most of my life would be. Clayton Christensen says a very provocative thing. So we're talking about culture journey, maybe in a sense, and he says that organizations do not have culture. There is no such thing as corporate culture or organizational culture. Individuals in organizations and corporations have culture. But what we perceive as corporate culture is very simply the sum total of its processes, because that is what will drive communal behavior. So if we want to influence corporate culture, so if we want transversal work, if we want intersectoral work, if we want to pull in all the pipeline value elements towards a common goal, which is just and agreed upon, then we have to make that structurally possible, which means that the laws and the rules and the job descriptions and the KRAs and the OKRs and all of those things, the hard work, the very unsexy work, needs to be done to make that behavior at the bottom of a smooth slope down rather than at the top of a steep slope up. So for me, it starts with knowing that I'm a public servant, so everything is my business. My mandate is health. So if it touches health, it's definitely my business to chip away at it as an individual, but then also to realize that unfortunately, sometimes the unsexy work of structural reform needs to happen. That takes time, but it must happen.
Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Almero. We're going to Ben, and then I've got a question from Maggie that I will read from the comments.
Hi there. Hi, Almero. My name's Ben.
Hi, Ben.
I'm dialing in from the other country called the Eastern Cape. Just to start off by saying, it's the first time I've managed to join one of these FACE seminars, and I feel almost like you're restoring my faith in humanity, let alone just kind of public service thinking. I also work for the Department of Health, but I can't tell you how different your kind of thinking is to what is prevalent in the Eastern Cape. Like, honestly, different languages completely. And so perhaps kind of as a outworking of that, because I think one of the challenges that we have, not just in the Eastern Cape, of course, is keeping people in the public sector. The reality is that many people have left the public sector, and in the modern day and age, the unemployed junior doctors are sitting outside of the public sector, even though they want to be in it. So my question is really about how can we translate this thinking into private sector spaces? Your example about the farm workers in Ceres area was perhaps some of that, but I've been wrestling with, my wife set up a private GP practice last year, and I mean, we thought nothing could be further from our intentions or hearts, but when politics intervened where we were in the Eastern Cape, and we found ourselves outside of the public sector, or she is, I still work in the public sector, we found it so much harder to promote health justice because you don't have the same array of tools, and particularly the access to the people who need it the most. So I just wondered if you wanted to either expand on that farming example, or just some thoughts on how can we help private sector colleagues, who I almost felt was like anathema because they'd chosen to leave the public sector. But the reality is they're there, and many of them would like to continue making a difference, but find themselves a bit constrained. So yeah, just interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you guys are pushing me. I love it. Ben, I think I'm going to start off with a weird analogy. And I want you to so when I teach the juniors in my unit how to deal with someone who wants to sign themselves out, they just can't take it anymore. They want to leave now. I ask them, what's the first thing you should tell this person? Well, no, you should. I said, no, the first thing you tell them is, okay. You say, of course you can leave. We're a healthcare facility, not a correctional facility. And I want you to be very comfortable with the fact that not only will I allow you to go, I will help you to go if that's what you really need. But I want you to be safe. Can we just have a chat about that? But I respect your decision. And when you take that cage away, all of a sudden there's a freedom. Because it's the cage that drives that desperation. And it's going to sound weird, but what I've said to myself and to many other of my friends in the public sector is, it's okay to go if you need to. Helping people is helping people. I have a friend at the moment. She's a public sector orthopedic surgeon she's a highly qualified joint surgeon. And she's just in a performance disabling environment, and it's just awful. And because she thinks that, well, public sector, I'm going to help people, I think that she's allowed herself, like many of us do, to get caught in what is effectively an abusive relationship. Interestingly, when we go look at moral injury and harm, the answers that we get about how to deal with docs is when we go look at GBV and intimate partner violence literature. That's when you start understanding what happens to us in these performance disabling abusive environments. And so I told her, listen, why do you do what you do? She says, well, I want to help people. I said, well, this place where you are now, that's a vehicle, that's a tool, that's not the answer. Let's say if you have the potential to help 100 people a week, but where you are now, because it's such a disabling environment and you can't change that, you're helping 30 people a week, then it's your duty to leave and to go somewhere where you can help more people. And so it's not all of the answer, but a part of the answer is to say, there's no point in shackling yourself towards health justice if you've reached a point where you know that it's just not going to get better right now. Maybe I can find another way to participate, but I need to help people now. So that's one part of the answer. I think another part of the answer, which would then more naturally flow from that, where we say there's no, well, there is obviously private health and public health, but really there's just the healthcare sector. I know some really awful people in the public health sector, and I know some really saint-like people in the private healthcare sector. And I think I know many people in private health that experience this idea of them being perceived as anathemas quite powerfully. And so maybe another part of the answer is to say that these guys are not our enemies. Our enemies are our enemies. So maybe some of them are, but if they're sitting around the same common ground, again, powerful common ground, if they're sitting around the same common ground of health justice, then they're our friends, and to value them as such, and to embrace them as such. And out of that relationship and common ground, you don't need to prescribe or predict too much what's going to grow out of that. What we've learned over and over and over is good things happen when you do that. Then maybe the last part of what I want to say is to say there's this idea of align before you design. And so what happens is if, let's say we have an external partner. Let's say it's a funder to NGO, to private provider, whatever else. It's Gates funding an NPO to do mother and child care in rural catering. And so if you're someone like that, you want to obviously align with what the DOH is doing because you want to be part of that value pipeline. And so that's seemingly quite easy. Huh? So they do health, we do health, check. So they've got 5 priorities: trauma, mental health, HIV, fetal and maternal. Okay, we've got that. Boom. Okay, we're going to work in HIV derm. Okay, they're working on fetal maternal transfer. We'll do on that. And then you get to a certain point of alignment, and then they start building product. Yes. And then there's a gap between us and them, and then they deliver that product that should be useful into that gap. But if that product doesn't touch an existing activity inside the DOH, it forces us to do one of 3 things. Either let it go or build a whole stream to be able to link it, or bend something that we have already to take it. We see that all the time where external and funder-related programs bends internal programs so that they can touch it. But if we can now sit around that common ground, and if we can embrace people as partners rather than wonder if they're our enemies, and I'm not trying to be naive about that, so you have to be real about that. So let's think together and let's align profoundly from what you have to where we want to be, and then let's design together so that even before we start building, it's already designed to interface and link with something we're doing. And I can tell you this is not just an idea. We've got a number of iterations now of this type of workflow with external partners, and it over-delivers on our expectations every single time. Yeah, so health is health, man. Helping people is helping people, and being in an abusive environment isn't necessary. People should be allowed to be where they can help. And then I think people shouldn't be thought of or made to feel that they're enemies just because of where they are or not. Embrace people. And then align before we design. And that, again, that requires some humility and courage. And some vulnerability. So let's lift skirt and let's see what we need to do to make the world a better place.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Almero. Thanks, Ben. There's 2 minutes left for the last question, Almero. I'm just going to read it. So it's about, so we know progress and improvement is a process. It's complicated. There's theory behind it. It's a communal endeavor. It needs to be aligned, etc., etc. But that's not what happens on the shop floor. We know people are asked to improve something quickly and come up with a plan to do this and come up with a plan to do that, etc., without alignment, without having the agency, etc., etc. I've got a question from a newly qualified emergency physician. Let me just quickly scroll to her. Maggie, who's now working in Walvis Bay. And she's recently set up an emergency center over there. And she's asking, with regards to this framework, what advice do you have for her as in her current setting? How do you apply these principles at the very beginning of your journey? And then we're going to We've got 2 minutes and then we're going to end there. Thank you, Almero.
Well, I mentioned earlier that there's this layer of richness, and then there's a concrete layer, and so Maggie is trying to straddle both of that. And I think that we need to avoid the temptation of concrete execution advice where the local context isn't well understood. So these principles, yes, are principles that can be understood and thought and explored in principle. But the moment we're at a point where you ask a relatively concrete question, I am an early career emergency physician establishing a new emergency service in Walvis Bay. How do I apply these principles to my early career journey? That's a very specific question. And to that, I'd say, Maggie and I have already had conversations about other things. She can contact me if she wants. But again, I think that connection is really important. That's what we want from our leaders and our managers and the people that are supposed to be there, is not to just like do drive-by shooting advice. Okay, to do that, and then they're gone, and I'm left with all the wounds. But to actually engage. But maybe a good thing would be to take some, if you can, and I know it seems like an impossible luxury, if you can, create some time and space for yourself away from the daily grind. And then think on these ideas and overlay it with what you're busy with. And then ask yourself, how would you frame it? Does it help you or not? So as a thinking tool almost, as a meditation tool maybe in a sense, but as a thinking tool. And yeah, then you're very welcome to contact me if you'd like to.
Thanks, Almero. What I'm hearing is that we focus on the alignment and the why we do things. Take time out to think, and that's exactly what we're not doing. If there are no other questions, I want to thank you, Almero, for your time and your investment. We really enjoyed it. It's big concepts, and I think we can apply it to all of our settings. And I'm quite excited to see the CSI and all the projects coming to the fore and all the results, etc. I'm really excited. We're in a new phase, I think. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
It's been such a pleasure to talk to all of you. Thank you very much. I'd be very eager to hear any of your feedback or comments on the ideas specifically. No one is harder on our ideas than we are. And so please disagree with me viciously if you want to. It helps us. My contact details are in there, and then I will also be going through the chat. There was some glare on my spec, so I had to take it up, but I'll be going through the chat after the fact and just providing some answers and responses here and there. So if any of you guys had put in questions in there that hasn't been answered, you can check back in it in a little while once the meeting is over, because the chat persists, and I would have replied to it in the chat. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. Thanks, Clint.
Thanks, Almero. Thank you, everybody. Bye.